Hey everybody, what's going on? How's everybody doing? This is a Thursday night, and it has been quite the week or two. And thought we were promised that 2021 would be much better, and yet here we are. But I'm excited to spend the night with all of you talking about the future of orthodontics. I think this is going to be a really great podcast episode. I'm very excited about the guests that I have on with me tonight. And so welcome to the Digital Orthodontist Live. I'm your host, Dr. Kyle Fagala, and tonight I'll have three true leaders in orthodontics with me, Dr. Chris Roberts, Dr. Brent Larson, and Dr. Trista Felty, and we're going to discuss the future of orthodontics. And for that, I have my Back to the Future little cup here. So this is in honor of one of my favorite movies of all time and in honor of the future. We're going to be talking about that tonight. Our specialty is changing. We would all agree with that. And I think we have to learn to change with it. And I don't think that's a bad thing. So tonight we're going to talk about corporate orthodontics. We're going to talk about the evolving role of organized orthodontics. We have some present and past AAO presidents on the show. We're going to talk about teledentistry. We're going to talk about new and maybe upcoming digital systems. And we're also going to talk about how all these changes are impacting our residency programs, which in a way impacts all of our profession. Before I bring our guest on real quick, I do want to announce that this podcast is going to have a sponsor this year. It does cost money to produce a podcast and to host a webinar on Zoom, believe it or not. But I was able to find a sponsor that I believe supports the orthodontic community and has for long before I was an orthodontist. Certainly they support my practice. And so it seemed like a natural fit. And so today's episode of the Digital Orthodontist Live is sponsored by 3M Oral Care. And so I've got a quick little ad that I'm going to read, and then we'll do one towards the end of the program. But this one is about 3M Clarity Aligners. And so adding 3M Clarity Aligners to your treatment options allows you to grow your practice your way, to showcase your expertise, and to ensure optimal care for your patients. 3M's full portfolio of naturally aesthetic treatment options is informed by 3M science and fueled by creativity. To learn more or to request a demo, visit 3m.com/clarity aligners. That's 3m.com/CLARITY aligners. Thanks again to 3M, and let's roll the intro, and we'll be back in 30 seconds with Doctors Robert, Larson, and Felty. Hey, look who we got here. We got our guests with us. You guys look lovely tonight. How are you doing?
Fabulous.
Good.
Doing great.
You guys, it's been quite a year. We were commiserating in the little pre-interview that Chris has had to be president during all this. How are you holding up, Chris?
You know, it's been an interesting year. Certainly not the year I expected as AAO president, but it's all good. You know, a lot's happened this year. A lot has not happened this year. But quite honestly, I feel very fortunate to be AAO president at a time where our members really need the AAO and all the things that we've been doing during a global pandemic. So overall, it's been great.
Yeah, not to overstate it, but it's sort of like being a wartime president or something. So we'll write books and perhaps songs about you for years to come.
Fabulous.
So obviously the two of you, you stay busy too. I was actually Memphis Dental Society president until about like early March, and so I sort of missed out on all this fun. So believe me, I was grateful to have come off of that at that time. So I do want to read a little bit of your bios. It's too much to read three bios like one after another. But if you don't know how impressive these three people are, let me give you just a little bit about them. So Chris Roberts is current AAO president, co-director of GORP. I didn't know that. Yeah. Way to go. And he's also completed the Boston Marathon a mere 21 times. And that's kind of cool. He probably has other things he's done too, but we're just going to focus on a few. Trista was a college swimmer at Villanova. You're joining a proud company of guests I've had on who have been college athletes. I've learned that is like a commonality among really exceptional people. You swam the English Channel in dental school. I think it was a part of a 3-person group, but I'm still going to just stick with you swam the English Channel, which is amazing. She's also birthed 4 children, which is probably the most amazing thing. So I also have 4 kids. God bless you. And then Brent Larson is director of ortho at University of Minnesota. For me, I know Brent as the voice of Practical Reviews in Orthodontics because we listen to it and I championed that. I don't know if you do that still, but that was you, right?
It was me, but
Okay.
not anymore.
Well, fair enough. But you were when I was in residency, and we made sure that that became a part of the curriculum because I thought they were so great. And he was 2018, 2019 president of the AAO, back when things were just easy and not hard at all. So impressive stuff for sure. Okay, so thanks for agreeing to come on here, being the heavy hitters that you are. We're going to talk tonight in, I think, 4 different topics. And so we're going to get through a couple questions from each. And I hope that the audience out there, if you'll comment and kind of let us know how you think and what you think about, we'll try and get some interaction in as well. But the first topic is going to be on changes. And so I was going to play a song, maybe play the David Bowie song, or I don't like Bob Dylan, I'm sorry to say, but you can't get around the times they are changing. And I was going to do a Bob Dylan voice, but I'm not going to. But it's interesting because with this topic on the horizon, I had a dental student message me. I think he goes to Oklahoma, and he had questions about like literally everything that we're talking about tonight. And so I think this is a pertinent topic for all of us who are, active in the orthodontic community and those who are considering being in the orthodontic community. And so I had a great conversation that really prepped me for this. But let's start then in that mindset with residency programs. And so Dr. Larson, you are director of ortho at the University of Minnesota, as we said. Do you mind giving us just sort of a brief update on residency programs and then maybe some areas of concern that you have?
Sure. First of all, you could spend a whole webinar on this topic alone because there's so many things going on. But let me just highlight a few things that were going on and continue to go on even before the pandemic. That is the challenge of teaching in this digital technology world. And a lot of us think about, well, it's costly to buy technology and get that in the programs, but that's not really the biggest barrier. The biggest barrier is getting people to teach it. Because if you think back to when you were in residency, your clinical instructors probably were largely people later in their career that were very experienced, and they thought now is a good time to give back. And they had great ideas, great experience. But those people in today's world are generally not the ones that can come in and know 3D imaging, in-house printing, aligners, all the other things that we're trying to do to prepare people to practice in tomorrow's world, not today. So that technology and finding the appropriate people to help teach it is a challenge. We're facing, as everybody knows, the student debt issue, and the student debt continues to increase. And, depending upon, I don't know, Chris, if you have any more data from the AAO, but when I was president, I think we found that the average orthodontic graduate had about $400,000 in debt. And certainly that can impact their ability to choose to practice the way they'd really like to. So that may be one of the factors that's stimulating some of the things we'll probably talk about later. So student debt is an issue. And then the thing that I think really critically important is this changing world, and it's changing so fast that we have to be really intentional about making sure we teach people not just how to do it, but why we do it. So they can adjust and change, because their tools are going to change 4 or 5 times probably through their practice lifetime. So you take all those changes that are happening, and then you roll in the pandemic that's really challenged the programs as much or more as your practice, Kyle. And, we've got some things we've got to work on. Now, that being said, I think we've got some great educators, and we're going to face these challenges successfully. But there's certainly some things that we'll have to be looking at straight on.
Yeah, that was great. Very well said. Chris, Trista, either you have something to say about residency programs. Do you guys teach or help out with any residencies?
Yeah, I've been a 20% appointment for 30 years at the University of Michigan, and Brent hit it right on the head. I mean, yeah, we have to be able to teach people not to practice how you're practicing today, but for tomorrow. It's changing so fast, and so education is the very key. And certainly, economics of education is tough. I think the schools that are really going to prosper and do well are going to be the ones that have good alumni support. Because programs are, funding is being cut by deans and dental schools. And so get out there and support your school, support your alumni association.
Oh, for sure. Trista, are you teaching yet?
Yeah, I teach at UBC just once a month. But yeah, I would agree with all the points that were previously made. It's a combination of factors, which makes it harder. It's not just one thing. But I know it's something everyone's looking at from different angles. And I think recruiting younger practitioners is definitely helpful, because you can also teach students kind of what you're struggling through at the same time. And I feel like I learn so much from the students, as well when I'm there and the questions they ask. So it's a win-win with teaching.
Yeah, no doubt. It was, I was a resident not that long ago. I graduated in 13, and we had so many part-timers at the University of Tennessee. It was a real credit to the Alumni Association there. And that's obviously you learn from the full-timers, but you learn a lot from even the once-a-month kind of people like Trista. I'm a no times a month, so let's move on to the next question, because now I'm feeling guilty. I feel like I'm in church and I'm not putting anything in the collection plate. So, kind of along the lines of residency programs, one thing that has changed recently is that there's been an increase in private residency programs, or ones that cost a lot, right? And so with that comes an influx of new orthodontists every year. It seems to have grown. Trista, you mentioned this. I didn't know this, but Saudi Arabia was the first international school outside of the US and Canada to get accreditation through CODA. Did you know that out there? I did not. And so I guess along those lines, like thinking about more residents every year, now we're kind of opening the door for perhaps international programs. What impact is this going to have in the US workplace? And then I guess as a converse, is it necessarily a bad thing?
Well, I know for myself personally, I mean, I'm American who's practicing in Canada. And so we're seeing more residents even just between the US and Canada. And then Canada also has agreements in dental schools with Australia, England, and Ireland. As well. And so I think you're just going to see, I mean, the global world is getting smaller. So I don't think this is a huge surprise that we're going to see more and more programs achieving the levels that CODA wants, and residents being able to travel farther to get educations. But then it's also going to change the dynamics of people coming out in practice, because obviously there's different things in different parts of the world that are kind of taught or that are popular.
Yeah, sure. Chris, is this something that comes up a lot with the AAO in terms of kind of concerns? I mean, I'll just give you sort of like my grassroots understanding is that this comes up when we have like our Memphis Association of Orthodontists, and like, how do we get them to stop opening so many schools, but like, what is it that you guys are talking about on your level?
Well, that's not one of the things we say in the orthodontic boardroom.
I didn't say you, and I'm not quoting anyone. I'm just saying that I've heard something along those lines.
Yeah, we'll get that straight right away. No, it's happening out there, and it's a free market, and it's something that you really don't have a whole lot of control over. But on the other hand, I think it's good. I think competition is good. You may not like competition. Yeah, it would be great to be the only orthodontist within a 100-mile radius, but that's not going to make me want to be any better at what I do. So, I think there's going to be more orthodontists trained. The good programs are going to survive. The programs that are not so good, people coming out of dental school aren't stupid. They're going to look at some programs and say, the people that are graduating are having a hard time getting a job, or they're not being well trained. I'm not going to apply to that program. So I think the programs that do a good job of training orthodontists are going to do fine and prosper. The ones that are marginal are going to struggle.
And I would add that, thanks to Dr. Roberts, I'm now serving on the Commission on Dental Accreditation. And the key is really to make sure we have appropriate standards in place so that anybody that goes through either dental school or specialty training, that they meet a level of training that is adequate and sufficient. And so I think that's where there is work to do to make sure that those stay current, and that we hold programs to those standards.
Sure. Yeah. It's funny. There's a both healthy and unhealthy level of what I think is a good or a bad program too, in fairness. And I remember, you have this idea when you go to GORP, that's the only time you really see other residents, and you're like, where do you go to? So what I have kind of found on this side of things is that there are successful orthodontists that went everywhere. And so, that would be a whole nother like interesting conversation is how do we measure those things? We have to ultimately trust, the governing bodies that are in place to ensure that these schools are accredited and they're all putting out, well-trained orthodontists and so on and so forth. And if they aren't, over time, that will probably catch up with them. So let's shift on into this. Another thing in terms of changes I feel like a lot of these conversations have been had many, many times, especially with those of whom are on a lot of boards. You've probably talked about this next topic 17 times, but it's still important. And I think for those out in the audience that maybe have not, this is something we want to talk about. So more than 50% of orthodontic residents are female. At Tennessee in particular, I think they have 12 residents, and I think 10 or maybe 11 are female, like something like that, which is crazy is the wrong word. It's just very different. Crazy insinuates there's something wrong with it. That's not the case. It's just different than when I was there. I think there were, 3 females or something, right? There's like 1 per class, and now it's the opposite. At all levels though, and if you look down the AAO speaker list and you look at the leadership list, it's predominantly male. Now, of course, some of that is a vestige of the history and so on and so forth. But again, the majority of the speakers at meetings are male. The majority of guests on podcasts are male, and I guess I'm guilty of that too. I do my best. But Chris, as AAO president, sorry to put a tough one on you, but what can we do to better represent our changing demographic?
That's right, Kyle. We are changing. We're changing rapidly. I'll date myself a little bit. Back when I was a resident, my class was all male. The class in front of me was all male. The class behind me had 1 female and 5 guys. That's not the way it is anymore. More than half, as you said, residents are female these days. The way the AAO structure is set up to be, say, elected to the AAO Board of Trustees, just the way we have it, you've got to be involved for a long time at both either the local or the regional level to get elected to the Board of Trustees. So we would look around the board and, they all look like people like Brent and like me. We were kind of white males at, toward the end of our practicing career. And that's just a measure of the system. So what we decided to do a couple of years ago, I think when Brent was president, was bring on a new and younger member as a liaison to the board to see how that would work. And the first person we chose was Trista, and brought her on. She was great. She added a lot to our board, but she wasn't a full member of the board because our bylaws didn't say she could vote. So this year, the board put before our House, which is our governing body, put before the House a resolution to say, let's add some at-large trustees. Let the Board of Trustees look at themselves and say, hey, what are we missing? Where do we need to have some diversity on the board? And the House passed that. We added 2 at-large trustees this past year, Dale Ann Featheringham from Columbus, Ohio, and Alex Thomas from Spartanburg, South Carolina. And they're great, both females. Alex had just been out of school a year and she's on the board. Without us doing that, we would never have been able to have somebody so young on our board. And it's been absolutely fabulous, but we can't stop there. Not just the Board of Trustees needs diversity, all of our councils, all of our committees that we have, our task force. We all need to look around the table and see people other than people that look like me. So in December, I put out a call. I want to start an inclusion and engagement task force of people that typically aren't involved in leadership. What's keeping them from being involved? So if people are looking to get involved, go to our AAO website, aaoinfo.org. Next to a picture of me, there's a little link to the article. It says, hey, if you want to get involved, and make us a more diverse organization in our leadership, fill out a form. I'll see you give you a place on this task force. So we're changing. Change doesn't come easy sometimes. Sometimes it's slow, but we're looking around. We continue to change, and we're getting better.
So very good and very well stated. And I'm sure it's, again, been a figment of many conversations you've had, and I applaud you for the degree to which you've expanded that. And obviously it benefits all of us for that to happen. Trista, as someone who is involved and who was asked to do some stuff, what would you attribute that to? But also to those women that that aren't as involved as they would like to be. What do you think the reasons for that are? If that makes sense, what I just asked.
Yeah, Well, so first, I want to say I was a part of an all-female class at Temple. It was 6 women, and we were all awesome. It was a great group. But yeah, I think it's hard. I think a lot of underrepresented leaders oftentimes just count themselves out. They don't put their name out there. So I think a lot of it is, contact someone and let them know that you're interested, because a lot of times we are looking for volunteers. We just don't know who wants to do it. So if you have any interest, reach out to someone and let them know, so that way you can get placed. And I think, for me personally, I moved to another country and knew no one here. And so I signed up for the local orthodontic club, because it was kind of like, I needed to talk to other orthodontists. I needed to find out what happened in BC. And of course, because it's a small component, they needed people to help out. And so in a way, it was kind of fortuitous that I was willing to volunteer and there was space available for me right away. But I think for a lot of women, especially in my age group, you're balancing family and work. So volunteering becomes hard, especially if terms of leadership are very lengthy in time, because it's hard to say, well, I want to give 6 years or 8 years, and I'm trying to have children and trying to raise kids. And I think a lot of that the AAO is looking at on how we structure our leadership roles, so that it is more user friendly in a way, and people can be able to donate time in a frame that works for them and their lifestyle.
Yeah, very well said. Well,
can I just make a comment, Kyle? And that is, I would say that this grassroots change is definitely happening, and it's evidenced. Last week, I sat in on the Minnesota Association of Orthodontists board meeting, and of the 12 people on that Zoom call, there were 2 of us that were male. So and this is typically how leadership has started. You start at the local or state level, and then as you gain experience. So I think in 25 years, we may be having the opposite conversation. So it's great. Well, it's happening.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I will say, as someone who's put together a meeting, who puts together podcasts, who's spoken to those who put together meetings, it's obviously something that we're all aware of and that we're seeking for equity on. And not just because we're trying to serve, the cultural moment, just, in that sense, but because it makes sense and it's the right call. So I hope that continues on. And great answers, guys. We just killed the first topic. Very well done. We're going to shift into a much easier topic of conversation, which is corporate orthodontics. Okay. So just easy, very easy. So this is, for me, the elephant in the room as it pertains change and the future of orthodontics. And I'll share with you a little bit of data. This was some statistics that Chris Benson shared with me. Everybody knows Chris, of course. And I have to give a shout out to Chris. Chris has always been kind to me and has always been willing to jump on the phone with me well before I was doing any of this kind of stuff. And I remember getting on the phone with him for an hour and a half when I was, 1 year out of school, to ask him every question imaginable about orthopedo, and he's very kind to take that call. But he shared this info, which is, just to put things into perspective, the orthodontic office marketing budget is typically 3 to 5%, right? That's our operating budget. So not too huge. Ormco's marketing budget annually is about 4 to 6 million. You'll correct me if I'm wrong here, Chris, but the AAO cap is about $5 to $6 million. Is that right?
That's right.
You probably know it down to the cent, but if you combine Invisalign and Smile Direct Club, just as an example, not as a criticism, it is $250 million. Okay. So just inside of that, how does the traditional orthodontic practice and the AAO, for that matter, compete against this sort of power and marketing budget?
Well, the traditional practice obviously, doesn't have $250 million, laying around each year to spend on marketing. The AAO doesn't have $250 million laying around to spend on marketing. But we do have our CAP program. As you said, it's $5 to $6 million a year. That's that assessment you see when you get your dues statement. Typically, it's been $600 this year with the COVID pandemic. We cut it down to $300 because we knew this was just when COVID was hitting and practices were shutting down. So we lowered the assessment this year, but it'll be back up again on your due statement this upcoming summer, back to $600. I was looking at the numbers today on how effective our consumer awareness program is. And in the past 6 months, just the last 6 months, over 260 million people saw our ads. 260 million people saw our ads, which is crazy. our videos. If you've seen our happy mouth videos, I think they're hilarious. If you haven't seen them, again, get on the AAO website, aaoinfo.org, and look at them. They're really funny. Also, the precocious kid videos, they're really good. Those videos have been seen over 25 million times, which has driven over 1.8 million people to the AAO website. 1.8 million people have clicked on the AAO website. What do we find there? We find a lot of things about orthodontics and how to choose an orthodontist. Also, our orthodontist locator. So make sure that your information is correct on the AAO website so that we can direct patients to find you. No, we're not going to be able to compete with the huge companies out there, but we're making a difference. We can do things as an association by pooling our money together. You could never be as effective as the AAO is, just in your own private practice, or even, as DSOs. You could never be as effective as we are in what we do in our consumer awareness program. It's been a big success. Yeah, I know. You look at it every year on your due statement and say, well, what's this? What am I paying for? We're paying for people to go to the AAO website, learn about orthodontics, learn the difference between an orthodontist and a general dentist, and we're sending them to your office when they look at our locator.
Yeah, for sure.
Chris, I would just add too, if the original AAO cap was designed to leverage all the orthodontists in practice. So you've got 10,000 boots on the ground that are mimicking this national message, right? So the idea is that we focus on differentiating ourselves from non-specialists doing orthodontics, from direct to consumer, and not so much on differentiating ourselves from one another. It's kind of like the Chicago area Honda dealers. They all advertise together because they want consumers to first decide they want to buy a Honda. Once they've made that decision, then they'll fight amongst themselves for that specific business based on their service and other things. So I think that's what we have to do. We have to decide we're going to make sure that as a group, we differentiate ourselves from other people providing the service, and not so much on the guy down the street or the gal down the street.
Yeah. Well, what I've always harped on is that marketing, from a nationwide stance, is obviously much more expensive. Also, to go to the cap, it was for a long time done, more traditionally, television commercials, magazine ads, things like that. When it switched to digital, in my opinion, it became more effective, and I think everyone would agree with that. In your local market, you can market very effectively with a much smaller budget, that 3 to 5% budget, and you can be effective in those little areas. I won't have my logo on the side of a football helmet, but I can do pretty well. And ultimately, the strongest story is that an orthodontist is the best qualified person to render orthodontic treatment. And so I think we win in that way because I think we do have the most compelling and the strongest story. Let me shift on into the next question. It's going to be about direct-to-consumer aligners. So last week, you probably saw that Dentsply bought Bite. And if you weren't following closely enough, you may not have even heard of Bite. Actually, in the first episode ever, I had a joke about whether a company was a real direct-to-consumer aligner company or a made-up one. And I think Cole Johnson thought Bite was made up. But more power to him, I guess. But they were only the 5th largest direct-to-consumer company, and they just sold for $1 billion with a B. So I guess, what does this say about the future of direct-to-consumer aligners? What do you think this will mean? Are they going away? Are they going to overtake us more significantly? What are your thoughts?
I personally don't know if direct-to-consumer is ever going to overtake us. I think it's just an example of the fact that convenience is becoming king. So patients are looking for more and more ways to value their time. So whether that means less trips physically to an office, or whether it means that they want to do things remotely, I think that it's a way for us to capitalize and look at the things that these direct-to-consumer companies are offering, because realistically, we do offer, or we can easily offer, what they do and more. So it's just a matter of integrating that into our practice. And I think a lot with COVID, a lot of us have done that. Some of us might have been drug into it a little bit, but a lot of us have set up virtual appointments, online scheduling, made things easier for patients to access information and access to us. And I think that's realistically what they're wanting. It's not that they're saying they really want less care. They're saying they want stuff that's easier for them to get.
I think this brings up the whole topic of teledentistry and what's happening in teledentistry these days. And what's happening right now are state dental boards are trying to figure out what the rules are. And that's why the AAO is spending so much time right now lobbying state dental boards. Teledentistry, I firmly believe, is here to stay. It's not going to go away, but it's really important that teledentistry is done right. The AAO believes that an in-person exam before treatment begins is absolutely essential. There's things you just can't see on a picture or a video. Pre-treatment x-rays, absolutely essential. I mean, you can't start treatment without knowing, you can't do a periodontal exam from a photograph. Patients ought to be able to have the doctor's information, the doctor's contact number. That's important. That's all got to be in the teledentistry laws. We believe that doctors should be in a reasonable geographic perimeter. If a patient has an emergency, they ought to be able to find that doctor and be able to go to that doctor's office. So teledentistry is here to stay, but it's very important that the rules of teledentistry, the state dental board laws, the dental practice acts, have to be written properly. And that's what the AAO is doing right now, is going to different state dental boards and making sure that we're protecting the public. Nothing wrong with teledentistry, telehealth, but you got to protect the public.
Yeah, totally. From my spot, you know, it doesn't seem to have affected my business at all. Of course, I'm not able to know all things, and I'm sure I have, you know, confirmation bias out the wazoo. But it seems like, if anything, it's just created more awareness for tooth straightening. But if big companies keep buying them, it makes me wonder, well, what am I missing here? And so, you know, obviously they're chasing profits, as companies are wont to do. And so we'll keep an eye on it, and obviously a big conversation to be had there. So before we go on to this next one, I don't want to get too deep into this, Chris, and I'm sorry if you don't want to talk about this, that's fine. There was a comment kind of asking about your email this morning, and I thought you'd probably rather just go ahead and clarify it if that's possible. So some
Sure.
email this morning about kind of the political action committee, and I just rather you just clarify that.
Yeah, thank you. I did see that comment, and I'm glad you brought it up, Kyle. Yeah, I made a comment for those of you that didn't get a chance to read it this morning about some of the things that happened in Washington, D.C. in the Capitol building. And I just wanted to reassure our members that your PAC dollars are being spent very thoughtfully. We're really going to sit down and look at, assess our legislative agenda and make sure that your CAP dollars are being spent wisely. That's all it said. And it didn't say anything, we're going to change this, or we're going to change that, or we're going to only give to one party or another party. We just want to make sure that the dollars that our members give to the CAP are spent wisely. So we'll leave it at that. Also, I believe the comment had something about me not saying anything about the riots last summer. I did make a statement on the 1st of June last year about some of the things that happened in Minnesota last year in the death of George Floyd. I used that as a call to action, again, for the AAO to look at itself, look in the mirror and say, are we inclusive? Do we need to be more inclusive? And I think we do. So again, it's a call to action for people. If you don't feel like you're being represented well at the AAO level, get involved. We'd love to have you part of us.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for doing that. So we'll move on to the next topic. And these topics seem so much less controversial when viewed against what's happening in our country. And so we'll just leave it at that. So it's easy to talk about DSOs and OSOs, but that's what we're going to talk about: DSOs and OSOs. And OSOs may be a new term to you, but that just means orthodontic service organization. So much like DSO, but the ones that are just focused on orthodontics. This is also from Chris Benson. He's been showing up a lot, hasn't he? Hey, Chris. As of 2020, roughly 6% of orthodontists are part of DSOs or OSOs. Even just like from a year ago, there's so many new OSOs. There's Orthodontic Partners, Southern Orthodontic Partners, My Orthos, Chorus, Schulman Study Group has sort of an OSO. Those are all new, I think, in the last year, as far as I understand. This is Chris's prediction, but he predicts that DSOs, OSOs will reach 30% or more of the specialty by 2030. That's not that long away. And so he would say that's approximately 2,500 doctors. If it reaches 30%, it's going to grow after that. Some in the general dental kind of DSO CEOs, they see the penetration at 80% ultimately. I think that's probably likely in the general dental space. Okay, so that's a lot. That's not the sort of news as an individual practice owner who loves what I do and loves the way that orthodontics is now and has been. That's not what I want to hear, just to be very frank. But the rest of you will have to be more ecumenical about that. So I guess just kind of go one after another. What are the pluses and minuses of DSOs, OSOs? And then another thing, just to throw it out there, like the AAO, how do you make sure that you keep both traditional kind of orthodontic models and OSOs, DSOs together? Because I think we are better together. We're talking about political parties and how we're all very different and we disagree, but as orthodontists, like we are better together. And I would like to be able to advocate on behalf of all orthodontists as opposed to, yeah, we're this splinter group that only does this certain thing. And so that's a lot of questions, but who's ready? Who wants to answer that?
I would answer that. I think this also comments a little bit on more women entering the field. I know personally, like when I graduated, if someone had offered me an associateship for life position, I probably would have jumped at the opportunity because data shows that most women professionals are married to partners who are also professionals. So they're not the breadwinner. They have more flexibility to probably work part-time and have that work-life balance because they're still usually the primary caregiver. So I think you're going to see as more women graduate, there's going to be a lot more people looking for associateships. So that's a broad generalization, of course, because like I am a practice owner now. But I think when you initially come out, people are going to want that opportunity to potentially travel, to raise kids and maybe not have that burden of practice ownership from day one. And also we talk a lot about the lack of business education that a lot of programs, residency programs have, which make you a little bit more hesitant to start a practice as soon as you graduate if you don't have someone to kind of mentor and help you along the way. So I totally think that we're going to get more people in these type of organized practices where some of that is already handled on the back end. But I could also see that coming locally. You know, I could see a couple orthodontic offices merging together in a town to say, hey, we're going to run all our business. We're going to share a business center. We're going to share a 3D printing lab. And they kind of share resources in a way on a more local level, but still as a community.
Yeah, I think that's great too. I think consolidation is really what's going to happen as much as anything. And it's already happening. But pedo with GP, with ortho, with oral surgery, that will happen. There will be synergies and savings that come through that. Again, I'm such a, I love and have romanticized the idea of a single doctor owning a practice and hanging a shingle. I sound like an old soul, but I'm only 36. But it's great to be in that situation. But I don't have the same mindset and I didn't grow up during the same time as residents do now. Chris actually said that 80% of residents coming out now are looking for these types of jobs. He said 80%. Of course, I pushed back and I said, well, that's not been my experience when people reach out to me. He's like, well, who do you think is going to reach out to you? It's like, okay, that's fair. What do you see, Brent, with residents?
Well, what I was going to say is that I've started asking specifically about that when we interview folks, not as a selection criteria, but just interested in knowing what drives them, what do they strive to be. And the fact is, at least at the time when they're interviewing for programs, the majority of the people wanting to be orthodontists still want to be like you, Kyle. They have this independent, they want to run their own business. That's part of what attracted them. And so they may thrive in a small group practice where they share responsibility. But I think orthodontists are a special breed and we continue to be. And when I was AAO president, I attended the Association of DSO meeting. And so this is an association for DSOs. And one of the things that was a common discussion item amongst those is how do we basically engage orthodontists? They can't figure out exactly how to manage us. And the ones that are successful are those that are kind of altering their business model to mimic private practice. They have equity stakes. They have more management responsibility. They essentially are giving more independence to those practices. So I think what you may see is the practice models kind of come closer together, that the DSOs become a little more private practice like, and the private practice become a little more DSO like.
So I guess the question becomes, is there a place for the traditional model, or does that eventually just get squeezed out?
No, I think a traditional model will always be around, no doubt about it. I do agree, though, with Chris Benson. It's the DSOs and OSOs are going to grow over time. The ones that do it well, that have what I consider the right formula, that treat patients well, give good results, a great experience, I think they're going to prosper. The DSO, OSO models that are more worried about the bottom line and trying to see, as many patients and make as much money as they can, I think those are the ones that long term, I think, are going to have problems. There's room out there. And like Brent said, most of us kind of have a little bit of an independent streak in us, and we want to be out there and be our own boss, or be a part of a smaller group, a group practice, and not a large corporation. So I think there's always going to be room for people out there in private practice.
Yeah. I think we also need to recognize that a lot of this has been driven by student debt, and I wish we could go back in time and address that issue if it were even possible. It is what it is. So let's shift on into technology. We want to talk a little bit about that. And obviously, as we're talking about the future, that's going to be a big part of it. So this question will be about aligners. Aligners are becoming more popular. Man, everything that's happening in the future, I feel like a Luddite. I'm like such a braces guy. So anyway, this is tough for me as I'm watching this, I've been using my mask to wipe off my shiny face. So it serves a dual purpose. In 1996, only 1% of all treatment was aligner therapy. 1%. By 2020, that number had grown to 25%. Okay, so last year, 25% of orthodontic treatment was orthodontist. Chris Benson again. Hey, Chris. He predicts that by 2030, orthodontists will use more aligners than braces. So we're going to have 30% OSOs, DSOs. We're going to have more people using aligners than braces. Assuming this is true, what are your immediate thoughts about that, and what problems might this present, if any?
I think it's fabulous. I think, we have to just embrace the tools, and we have to be the best at handling those tools. So there's going to be something by 2030, there's going to be another tool that'll probably make aligners obsolete. And that doesn't matter, because orthodontists, if they embrace it, will become the best at it, and they'll benefit from it. So I think, I think it's a great trend. And I think, again, that orthodontists have to be using them the very best.
Yeah, it goes back to education. Again, we've got to be the ones to know how to use aligners and be absolutely as efficient as possible with them, because they're here to stay. And I agree with Chris Benson again that that number is going to keep going up, the percentage over time, because the market's going to dictate that.
And I think that you're reaching a whole different segment of the market too with the aligners, which is a great thing as well. More and more people are seeking orthodontic treatment because they prefer to have the aligners over braces, and maybe, orthodontic treatment with braces was just not an option for them before. But aligners, it allows them to carry on and have an aesthetic option. And I think that's a great thing that we can treat more people.
Yeah. Well, I'll come up with a contrarian point of view just because no one else wants to. You guys are all on the pay for aligner companies, I can tell. Just kidding.
No.
We're being sponsored tonight, literally, by 3M, and they're talking about their aligners. So I guess so am I. No, what I would say is, again, I'm not like a nostalgic kind of person, but I just prefer rendering treatment with braces. I feel like I have more control over it. I feel like I can guarantee better results on average. I'm also in a community that really likes and embraces braces treatment. Like, it's a difference in, do you want people to know that you're going through orthodontics, or do you not? And that is going to be culturally different and geographically different, and so on and so forth. And so I guess I have a little bit of a different take on it. I still do a tremendous amount of aligners and a lot of cases of aligners, and I like them, but I really don't like them when I don't like them. But I guess the same is probably true, of braces too. So I guess my one concern is just that with aligners, it seems like everyone feels comfortable doing aligners. We have aligners through the mail. Our average general dentist does all the aligners that they can possibly do. And so there's a little bit of like this worry that we're losing out on our unique selling proposition on some level. Of course, pediatric dentists and general dentists have done braces for a while, but it's never really caught on in quite the same way. And so do you not share concerns about that?
Let me take you back in time a little bit, Kyle. And that is when I was, going through training, what was coming out? It was the straight wire appliances and predictable bonding. Well, that was going to allow anybody to be able to do braces, right? Mm-hmm. And what happened is orthodontists embraced that and they used them better and it benefited them more than anything else. And the same thing happens with all the technology is that if we embrace it, the orthodontist benefits more than anything else. And so the same is true with aligners. If we embrace them, we're going to benefit from them more than anybody else. So I just don't see an issue at all. So come on, Kyle, get with it.
Well said.
Get with it.
I mean, I probably should. You sound like my former chair, Terry Trojan. He would use that exact example about the straight wire appliance. Yeah. Maybe there's a bit of a difference between those two, but I mean, it's a point well taken. Yeah. Well, let's talk as we're talking about technologies that you thought there was going to be a big impact and maybe it didn't land. What are these technologies that we're sort of flirting with right now are going to be truly relevant in 10 years? And so one of those that comes up often is 3D printing, digital treatment planning, sort of bracket and aligner customization, let's say cone beam, CT, I mean, all these sorts of things. What do you think of those items are going to be the real big players in 10 years?
I think all the above. Trista, go ahead.
No. I was gonna say, we're already seeing companies starting to print the aligners directly. I think Korea is usually ahead of the game on that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think that stuff's just gonna get faster and easier, and we'll be direct printing the aligner instead of the model in 10 years time, right in our offices. And that's why I think consolidation may happen, where people want to share lab space because the printers will get better or more expensive initially, and we'll all kind of share them so they run more frequently. But yeah, I think all those technologies are going to be used and incorporated better. All the digital components allow us to superimpose 3D images and the x-rays and the photos. It's a really neat time, I think, to be able to use technology in orthodontics.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think 3D printing is one that, the moment you saw it, you're like, oh yeah, that's going to be utilized a lot. So I've got a friend that's come up with a digital bracket, printing system, and we've seen all the different variations of that. But just the idea that I need some upper fives and you print them, that idea is pretty crazy. Same thing with aligners. I think that the idea that you could scan a patient after their exam, have their first set of aligners printed off, and you're not trying to predict out, movements for 9 months. You're just predicting out a few weeks, or 10 weeks. It'd be more predictable. And obviously, at some point, if we can do aligners without attachments, that would be cool. I don't know if that's going to be in 10 years. And I don't know how good aligners are going to print out from a printer within 10 years, but who knows? I would, not question anything at this point. What about like CBCT? I know in a residency kind of context, that's really where everything is headed. I don't have one. I don't really see sort of the unique benefit as when I need to know what's on a 3D. I send to an oral surgeon for that information. Again, I sound like the the caveman here. But you think that's going to be the predominant kind of imaging system in 10 years, or not quite yet?
Definitely, yeah, without a doubt. I think they're going to get cheaper, better images, less radiation. That's going to be the standard. Going back, back to Brent's days again, when cephalometrics first came out. Orthodontists are kind of hesitant on using X-rays for cephs. It's all going to take a little bit of time, but yeah, CBCT, it'll be the standard of care. In fact, it is in some areas already.
I would emphasize that 3D imaging will be the standard of care, but it may not be CBCT. It may be MRI. I bet in 10 years we're going to have compact dental MRI units that you can take an image every week if you want to, with no effect on the patient. So these things are changing. So come on, caveman, get with it.
Hey, next time I need to buy 2 X-ray machines, I'll just drop 100,000 on each one. So I'm just such a thrifty shopper. I couldn't resist a $36,000 paying ceph that works great. My margins matter, Brent. Let's ask this, just since we're picking on the old guys for a little bit, and by old I mean you look great, but are there any innovations traditionally that you thought would be a huge deal in 10 years and then they just never developed, just for kind of point of context?
Well, I don't know, 10 years. I was thinking earlier today, if you would have asked me that question when I was back in my residency program, I graduated in the late 1980s, what would orthodontics be like in 2021? I probably would have told you that the majority of cases would have been treated with lingual appliances. I thought that was going to be the way it was going to go. Lingual's still around, it's still used very effectively by some practitioners, but it's certainly not what I thought it was going to be back when I graduated from school.
And it was going to be lingual appliances with magnets.
With magnets, yeah.
Magnets to intrude the posterior teeth. And we had all these great appliances. So there's been a lot that comes and goes. And as you look at the adoption of technology, there's, that chasm that something has to cross over to become readily adopted doesn't happen that often. But I truly think that the things you were talking about, 3D imaging, digitally assisted treatment processes, those are all here to stay.
Yeah, there's no doubt. For me, I don't know, what Trista and I are sort of contemporaries, I believe. The big one was self-ligating braces. That was like the big thing when I was getting out. And I tried some cases in residency, tried a little bit when I got out, and it did not land with me, which would make sense again, because I'm, the backwards one. And I think it'll always be around, but I don't think it's been the thing that's just taken over, or even like copper night ties, like, that kind of concept. When I was like just into residency was like a huge deal, like this one wire kind of concept that's never really crystallized. Trista, any others that you think of that, and if you don't have one, that's okay. That's okay. I put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I can't think of any that I saw in residency that still haven't kind of come around. But yeah, no.
Well, the big one that actually has cemented itself was digital scanning. And I remember being at the AAO, and it seems like every maybe third AAO kind of has like a clear character as this is the AAO of the digital scanner, or most recently, this is the AAO of the customized digital bracket. You had those companies that launched at the AAO. And I remember the digital scanner AAO and walking around and trying all, the lithos, and I think 3M had theirs, and maybe iTero had theirs, and just being blown away and being like, well, this is definitely the future, and so and I did get one of those, Brent, and so I have two digital scanners. I'm just kidding, and I use my dial-up internet to get on there. So let's see this. Benson says, I think in-office 3D printing has been a big head fake so far. No economic return yet. I'm tired of everyone agreeing with you, Chris. And I think certainly some would disagree with you that you're taking it from an economic standpoint, and perhaps that's true. I think it's okay to also just play with toys because you enjoy it. I tried to get a 3D printer very early on. I did not see that it was helping my practice, and so I sold it. What are your thoughts on 3D printing right now?
I mean, it's something that we're just starting in our office, and we're just planning to kind of the same way, kind of get our feet wet, use it for like a retainer program, and to have it a little bit more accessible. But I already have an in-house lab tech, which I know is a little bit unusual. So it's kind of an easy fit for us. We have space, we have someone who can work it. And so for us, it's just an avenue. But I think you got to get to the point where you're doing all your in-house aligners to really see the economic profit. We're using it as like a convenience and a kind of a cool factor, for our patients to get, without having to go through a goopy impression and get retainers quickly.
Yeah. To me, it's just the analog to digital shift in the laboratory space. And just like in an analog lab, some people choose to do it in-house. Some people send everything out. It's no different, and the economies of scale are going to depend on how you utilize it, how you're staffed. It's just another tool, and it'll be evaluated the same way.
I'm reading another, man, the 3D printing's got people commenting. Started 3D printing during shutdown, and it's been amazing for retainers. Still a learning curve with aligners, but liking it for easy cases so far. Way cheaper than sending to an outside lab. Yeah, I think that's true. I think if you have a lab person, we didn't. And so that would have been really key, I think, to our success. It ended up kind of creating more work for me, which is a no-go. I don't like homework. So it did not work out, but we'll see where things go. So I do have one quick ad, and then we're going to go into our last segment, which I'm excited about. This has been really great. I've enjoyed it at least. And so if nothing else, I've had a great time. But I do want to have one final word from our sponsor, 3M Oral Care. Utilizing 3M Clarity Aligners gives you access to the 3M Oral Care portal, an online HIPAA-compliant software that you can access anytime from anywhere to create and approve treatment plans, like we were just talking about. The 3M Oral Care portal also allows you the flexibility to use the intraoral scanner of your choice, which we were also just talking about. Are you ready to give 3M Clarity Aligners a try? You can visit 3m.com/Clarity Aligners to learn how 3M Clarity Aligners can help you achieve the best outcomes for your patients and your practice. Okay, guys, we have made it to the end. I feel like I should do a little drum roll. We've covered so much tonight. You don't even have to go to your next AAO board meeting because we've covered it all here. So what does the future hold? Let's kind of look at this, from a 30,000-foot view. To the best of your abilities, what does orthodontics look like, and how is it different in 10 years? And then we'll do in 20 years. But in 10 years, what do you think, kind of around the bend, starting with Chris?
Gosh, 10 years from now, it's going to be just changed so rapidly. I think your typical practice, you're going to be seeing so much. Everything's going to be digital. I'm thinking, virtual reality. I can envision virtual reality in your consultations, in your treatment planning. It's just going to be really cool to be able to take everything and have everything digital. All your treatment planning, everything. It's going to be fun.
Brent, what do you think?
Yeah, I would sort of agree. I think we're going to have a situation where all treatment is going to be visualized and pre-planned in the digital space. So patients will know exactly what's happening. That space or portal will allow you to get any type of appliance that you want, whether it's aligners, whether it's traditional brackets or some hybrid, or the next best thing, which we can't even envision right now. So I think it's going to be an acceleration of current trends, but I do think there's going to be something there that we don't even think of right now.
I would say that the difference for us will be that we will be more mobile. We won't be as tied to a one location, have to be in your office to do work all the time. I think we're going to also be able to be a bit more mobile while we're doing all that digital planning and digital kind of conversations with our patients.
Yeah. For me, the key word for 10 years, and I didn't plan to answer this, but is hybrid. I don't think 10 years is actually as far in the future as it sounds. And I think that it will be the marriage of digital and analog on some level. And some things will have evolved more than we expect. Maybe what Brent is getting at, something will be in there that we don't necessarily expect to have been the case. But I think there will also be some adherence to some traditional systems and ways. But this idea of hybrid, I think, will be emblematic of 10 years. Now, 20 years, like any of us know, but what are your thoughts on 20 years, Chris?
20 years is just too far out there. Kind of like what Brent said, there's going to be something that's going to come along that's going to be a quantum leap that will just totally change, how we practice. How Trista practices. She'll still be practicing. Not me. But it's going to be totally different. And you're going to look back at 2021 and you're going to say, how in the world did we ever practice orthodontics that way when we have this? So it's going to be totally different.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a revolution in genetic testing. I think we're going to be able to know who's susceptible to various things. We're going to be able to manipulate molecularly where we want anchorage. We won't need TADs. We can just put a little jelly on those molars we don't want to move. I think there's going to be some really cool things that have to do with genetics and molecular manipulation.
Yes, I was going to say that I think there's going to be a bigger marriage between the medical, what we consider right now, just general medicine and dentistry, and kind of how those fit together and how we can utilize some of the stuff people are already doing research on. It's just not mainstream for private practice, but I think it will become more and more mainstream in our practices.
And I also predict Chris Benson will still be making predictions in 20 years.
I just have to say that if we have some sort of goo we can put on molars to keep them from moving, I want that same thing applied to getting six-pack abs and huge arms without having to work out. So I think there's a better use for that technology. But hey, if we have it for orthodontics, that's great. I'll finally get Anchorage right at this point, because I also tried TADS. That would have been a good answer, Trista. Yeah. Something we thought was going to be huge that really, TADS were huge when I got in.
You put them in every case in residency. They go in on everything.
Yeah, I have inserted 3 TADs post-residency. So sorry to the TAD lovers in attendance tonight. So let's wrap up with the final question. Again, you guys, you just want to come on and do this every time I do a podcast? No? Okay. And this is sort of the main question. This is a question that I got from the person that messaged me on Instagram. He was trying to decide what specialty do I do. And he asked me, he said, would you still do orthodontics today if you had the option? And so my question is if a teenager approached you, as they kind of often do, should I pursue orthodontics? What is your answer? And let's go in reverse order. Trista, what's your answer to that question?
I think absolutely. I don't think there's a profession out there where you get to work with you can customize who your clients are, in the sense you can have an adult focused practice, a children focused practice, but you get to work with patients who are relatively healthy, for the most part, happy to be there. And, just have kind of whatever energy you want going on in your office. I think, a lot of jobs, that is all dictated to you on who you're working with, what environment you're in. And you get to create such an interesting space to be in orthodontics, that those relationships you have with your patient, I don't think you could find in any other type of work environment.
Yeah, sure. Brent, what do you think?
Absolutely. I would encourage anybody to go into the profession. I gave a little talk at Gorp a couple of years ago after dinner, and my message was orthodontics tomorrow will be even better than it is today. And I truly believe that, especially for the people that are being trained today and are like you and Trista, that are comfortable in digital space. Even though you're a caveman, Kyle, you still are, comfortable with social media, all these other things that the people at risk are those of my generation and Chris's generation that aren't comfortable in that space. So I always tell people that the new grads are the ones best positioned to compete in today's world and tomorrow's world. So I would say an unequivocal yes to that answer.
Great. All right, Chris, you've never been asked this question. What's your answer?
Yeah, it's funny. Every year, the U.S. News and World Report comes out with the best jobs. It actually came out this morning. I don't know if anybody else saw it. We've dropped out. We used to be number 1 a couple of years ago. Then I think we're at 4 or 5. We dropped down to 11, which, it is what it is. And I'm not sure how they get those numbers anyway. But yeah, I'm going to echo the same things that Trista and Brent said. Without a doubt, this is absolutely fabulous. The key is to understand that the world is changing around us, be able to adapt to the world. If you go out there and work hard, it's going to be successful. There is no greater job in the world as far as I'm concerned. So all those doomsayers out there, to paraphrase Mark Twain, the reports of our death is greatly exaggerated. It's a great life. I would recommend it to anybody, but you got to work hard. It's not going to come easy.
Yeah, for sure. I would agree. I love orthodontics. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. U.S. World, I just looked up their list, and number 1 was physician assistant.
Right.
Yeah, that's the job I want. No offense. I mean, it's a totally great job. Sure. Man, I like to be my own boss. I don't know. So, so I'm still telling my kids, I'm trying to find which one is willing to work with me one day. And I've not found a taker yet. I think my third, George, is at least considering the possibility. My daughter, Libby, who's 7, absolutely knows that she would never work with me. And that's probably wise. Guys, this was great. I enjoyed it. I hope the audience did as well. We'll have a lot of people who watch it on the podcast, and certainly if you're out there, listening on the podcast, give us a 5-star review. We appreciate that. Our next podcast will be on another non-controversial topic. This is going to be Thursday, February 11th at 8 p.m. and it's on the topic of aligners. And so I thought it would be interesting to get people who advocate for different aligner systems to come on here, and not to duke it out, but to do a separate segment where we talk about pros and cons of those systems, and then maybe get everyone in for a roundtable to discuss aligner therapy in general. So we'll have some people from Invisalign, from 3M Clarity Aligners, and from ULab to talk about that. And we could probably do a whole nother episode where we have a few more systems, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Registration is going to be up soon. I also have to make a pitch for the Digital Orthodontist Live Meeting 2021. I know you don't want to do another virtual meeting, but this very likely may be the last true virtual meeting. So it may as well go out on a bang. Okay, so it's April 8th and 9th, 2021. It's going to be live from my new home in Memphis. And I'm going to get 10 of the biggest and most inspiring names in orthodontics to come to my home, and we're going to do it from there. And we're going to be focused on every part of the orthodontic practice. And the goal is that you leave this 8-hour meeting with good, high-yield information that you can bring into your practice, and that everyone in your practice can benefit from. And so I'm really, really looking forward to that. Sort of like a mastermind kind of a concept for a weekend. It's also very cheap. Our prices actually went down this year because we wanted to make it accessible to everyone. But 8 weeks is coming up. So if you don't get this on your schedule now, you're not going to be able to make it work on that Friday. So there's a promo code early bird. It'll save 50%. It's like $25 for team members, $50 for doctors. It pays for the CE, let's say. So go there, tdolive.com. You can sign up for that. And finally, thank you for spending your Thursday night with me. If you work tomorrow, best of luck. I don't. And so I get to go have like doctor's appointments and things. You know, this is what I do on my day off. Get a massage, go to the doctor. That's a big old day off. And if you don't work tomorrow, enjoy your weekend. Of course, big thank yous to our guests tonight, Drs. Chris Roberts, Trista Felty, and Brent Larson. You guys were A+. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks for having us.
Yep, thanks.
Very glad to have you guys. We're very excellent, as billed. And from all of us here at the Digital Orthodontist Live, I'm Dr. Kyle Fagala, signing off. Everyone have a great night. Thank you to Dr. Seuss we have in the chat. Thank you for all your time and input. Dr. Seuss, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to Lisa Alvitro and Emily and everyone else who's been out there watching. And we're going to have Scott roll our closing slides, and we will see you next time. Thanks, guys. Good night.